So guys, I wasn't actually intending to do a new Chris Eubank Jr. video for a few weeks. I was thinking of doing something potentially a little bit closer to his fight against Ronaldo Quinlan, and not, consistently in the run-up, because we've done enough Chris Eubank Jr. bashing on this channel recently. But when I saw the news that Chris Eubank Jr. is at present self-trained, and I saw the news that Chris Eubank Jr. will be training himself for his next fight, I couldn't resist the urge to make a video. Let me start by saying, Chris Eubank Jr. as a fighter, as I see him, an extreme offensive talent, a guy with immense athletic capabilities, a guy who puts punches together exceptionally well, a guy with a great engine, a good ability to punch to the body, and a real eye-catching style. I view him as a force of nature, a force to be reckoned with. I view him as a guy who can overwhelm and out-hustle opponents. Someone who would be a really unpleasant guy to be in the ring with, and someone who would be a very hard man to beat. Having said that, if I were a trainer in the opposite corner to Chris Eubank Jr., I would not be as scared of my fighter fighting Chris Eubank Jr. as I would various other fighters in the middleweight or even super middleweight divisions. Because as far as I'm concerned, Chris Eubank Jr., despite all of his strengths, which are numerous, Chris Eubank Jr. is far from a complete fighter. And when I say he's far from a complete fighter, I am of course referring to technical deficiencies within his game. Defensively, the guy is open. The guy is very open. He is potentially easy to catch and to counter, especially when he's engaging. If you look at spells in the Billy Joe Saunders fight, Billy Joe was picking him off with the jab. Eubank Jr. was really not effective from long range. Eubank Jr. was not effective with the battle of the jabs. Even if you look at the Spike O'Sullivan fight, and I kind of view Spike as like a medium class brawler, if you like, but if you look at that fight, you look at the absolute haymakers that Spike O'Sullivan was able to land on Eubank Jr. Eubank Jr. is no defensive wizard, which would be a concern to me, because at this stage of his career, whilst Eubank Jr. has shown a relatively good chin, let's be honest, the best and biggest opponents he's been in with haven't been known as big punchers. Billy Joe Saunders isn't known as a big puncher. Nick Blackwell isn't known as a big puncher. Dmitry Chudinov isn't known as a big puncher. Spike O'Sullivan, yeah, he's got power. In my opinion, he's a lesser fighter than those three. But regardless, what I'm getting at is Chris Eubank Jr. has shown these technical deficiencies defensively, and he is yet to face the elite punchers of the sport. He's yet to face the Golovkins, the Lemieux, and he's yet to face the big guys at 168 pounds, who obviously are bigger, stronger men than the guys at 160. In terms of his technique, it's not a pure defensive thing. Eubank Jr. has actually got a decent jab when he chooses to use it, but he neglects that jab sometimes. He's very offensively swarm-minded. He wants to come forward, he wants to unload, he wants to put punches together from the pocket and inside. That's what he wants to do. So he kind of negates that long-range game and neglects to establish his jab. If you look at that Tom Doran fight, and he dispatched Tom Doran with ease, but for some reason in that fight, for the early round or two, he decided to box long. Now, Tom Doran is not in Eubank Jr.'s class. He's also not in Billy Joe Saunders' class, or in my opinion, in a Pete Nick Blackwell's class. But you look at the problems that Tom Doran was able to cause Eubank Jr. from range. You look at how Eubank's obvious advantages in that fight only came to play when the fight got up close. And you can see that Eubank Jr., for all his strengths, is far from a complete fighter. And I think that when he faces someone who can keep him at range, which may be much more likely to happen due to the step up to 168 pounds, where the guys are bigger and stronger. Usually Eubanks enjoy the size and reach and height advantage over his opponents. That may be less prominent at 168 pounds. So for me, those technical deficiencies are more likely to be exposed and to cause problems in Eubank's game at the new weight class. For a start, if he is open defensively, he's more likely to get hurt at the higher weight class. When you're facing bigger guys, they're more likely to try and keep you at range, which means he's going to have to box from the outside a bit more. That's going to bring out the questions about how he uses his jab and that kind of things. So for me, the one thing Eubank Jr needs more than anything else right now, at this stage of his career, is a trainer. And a trainer he respects. Now, we've seen him working with Ronnie Davis, and famously he said that Ronnie Davis was there to hold a spit bucket and told him to be quiet. We've seen him working with Adam Booth, and we know that ended very, very swiftly indeed, and seemingly under questionable circumstances. So Eubank Jr is obviously a strong-minded individual. As we know, his father, Eubank Sr, is obviously a very difficult individual to manage and to deal with. So I can't imagine it's going to be an easy job for trainers to train Eubank Jr. And the real big-name trainers who've got other world champions and who've got other big-name fighters are probably not going to be inclined to take that gamble on training Eubank Jr. They've probably got too much on their plate. Although Eubank would clearly be an attractive fighter to train if you were a lesser-known trainer. But I think Eubank Jr does need a trainer to improve. And I think, despite the improvements he has shown, he needs to improve again in order to be able to beat Billy Joe Saunders in a rematch, certainly to beat a guy like Gennady Golovkin, and certainly to mix it with the top guys at 168 pounds. If I look at some of the big fights out there for Eubank Jr, George Groves, James DeGale, Billy Joe Saunders, Gennady Golovkin, all four of those guys, I would say, have substantial technical advantages over Eubank Jr. All of them do. And I also think, with the potential exception of George Groves, who's shown some durability problems in the past, all of those guys are going to be a lot harder to wear down and to stop than the majority of opponents Eubank Jr has been feeding on. James DeGale, weight class above, big guy, has never shown a chin problem. Gennady Golovkin, never shown a chin problem, top fighter in the division. Billy Joe Saunders, never shown a chin problem, beaten Eubank Jr before, has elite movement and slick defence. All of those guys are not guys who are just Eubank Jr is just going to be able to walk through. We've seen that already when he stepped up to fight Billy Joe Saunders. So for me, the way he's going to have more of a chance of beating them is improving technically. He's going to be sharpening up his defence so they're less likely to score easy points by just jabbing his head off. It's going to be improving his long range game so he's not losing rounds if the fights are fought at distance and if the guys are able to move and manoeuvre so that the fight has to be at range for some of the time. And that's where I really think that a world-class trainer could take his game to the next level. I know he's done a bit of work with the Mayweathers in the past. And I know obviously he's not going to be the star over there that he likes to think he is, but the Mayweathers would be perfect accompaniment to Chris Eubank Jr, I think, in terms of their understanding of the boxing game and of the benefits of solid defence, of point scoring, of technical ability, etc. But right now, it's just going from the sublime to the ridiculous with Chris Eubank Jr. 6 months ago or so, we were talking about him fighting Gennady Golovkin on a massive pay-per-view event that would have done huge numbers and been the biggest fight of last year. That would have led to many people calling him the pound-for-pound number one if he'd been successful. Now we're talking about him moving weight class. 1. We're talking about him fighting in a leisure centre. 2. We're talking about him fighting for the IBO title. Bizarre. 3. We're talking about him fighting an opponent that, let's be honest, not many of us have actually heard of. We're talking about him not fighting with a boxing broadcaster, but launching pay-per-view under these bizarre circumstances against this bizarre opponent. 5. And to throw another one into the mix, we're talking about him now doing it without a trainer. And for those of you who follow Eubank Jr. on Instagram and that sort of stuff, you'll be aware that Eubank Jr. was out at a recent UFC event hanging with David Haye and various celebrities and, posting videos and that sort of thing. Now, Eubank Jr. is a very fit guy. He seems always in good condition. He clearly is someone who trains very hard and is very self-motivated to train. So, I don't suggest for 1 second whatsoever that Eubank Jr. not having a trainer and Eubank Jr. going out to do celebrity events with David Haye and Jamie Foxx is going to necessarily mean he shows up undermotivated, overweight and out of shape. I don't believe that whatsoever. But what I will say is, for me, it's a concern that Chris Eubank Jr. has decided to start doing extensive holidays in Dubai and in the States at exactly the same time that he's now trainerless. You know, it doesn't bode overly well. It may be that he's not overly up for this Quinlan fight because he knows he's so many leagues above Quinlan that, you know, he doesn't need to be in peak physical condition. It may be that the move up to 168 pounds is putting less strain on him in terms of cutting weight. And if that's the case, then you know, that would make sense. Maybe he doesn't need to train quite so hard because he's not so worried about keeping his weight down. But the world of Eubank is bizarre as ever, and for me this news is just another piece of the puzzle, which is making this upcoming fight against Quinlan the most bizarre fight that you're likely to see all year. Now, Eubank Jr. says he's open-minded to taking a trainer later on in 2017. I don't think the Mayweather thing that I mentioned earlier on in this video is at all realistic, because I think Eubank Jr. likes to be the star. I think Eubank Sr. likes to be the star. And whether the Mayweathers, who have celebrity on a whole new level, would want to put up with egos of the Eubanks is highly, highly questionable. You know, I suspect they'll go for a trainer that they can dominate and a trainer that sort of fades into the distance rather than a massive character. But let me know your thoughts, people. If you were in their shoes, who would you be picking as their next trainer? What is your take on this news? Do you think it's a bad sign for Eubank Jr.'s career? Do you agree with me that, you know, the actual areas that he needs to increase on the most, you know, long range game, technical defence, etc., are the areas that a trainer could most add value? That's why, you know, there's certain fighters who are so complete technically, maybe what they do need is like a fitness trainer. But I think Eubank Jr. needs a boxing trainer. Do you agree with me on that? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you've enjoyed this video, please take the time to hit the thumbs up button. I'd appreciate that. And if you're new to the channel, as always, please subscribe. Many thanks indeed for watching, guys.